Fascinating study of purported phone calls from the dead phenomena and some confirmation. But before I go into the study, I want to tell you about a true event that happened with a lady from the States that called her spiritual father confessor, now Saint Porphyrius of Athens, Greece. She called him in order to speak to him, to talk about her problems, her fears, her anxieties, basically a confession over the phone. And she called him at his monastery, and he picked up the phone, and she was speaking to him. She says, hopefully I'll come and visit you in a few months. And he says to her, oh, that's not going to be possible, my dear girl, because I passed away 2 months ago. So that is, he did speak to her. He picked up the phone and spoke to her, and he informed her that he had already passed away. So let's see where this fascinating study of phone calls with speaking with the dead by Tara McIsaac of Epoch Times. Pretty much since the dawn of electronic communication devices, people have reported hearing the voice of spirits through these devices. Since the early 20th century, many have set up recorders in quiet rooms and played back the recordings, hearing what they say sounds like human voices. Some have even reported receiving communications from the dead via telephone calls, images on televisions, and even computer screens and more. Can you imagine? Though many experiments have been carried out with various degrees of success, the mainstream media scientific literature on the phenomena is scarce. Experiments are dismissed by some as flawed in their processes or as failing to yield the degree of certainty required by mainstream science to accept a phenomenon as being real. Dr. Imants Brarus at the University of Western Ontario in Canada made a rare move in seriously studying the so-called electronic voice phenomena, EVP for short, publishing his study in the Journal of Scientific Exploration back in 2001. Though his report is titled Failure to Replicate Electronic Voice Phenomena, it admits partial success in replication. While Dr. Banus could not provide the clear hard proof of EVP he was able to detect what sounded like voices and even some words that his assistant felt may have come from a deceased acquaintance of hers. Barus replicated EVP in a weak sense, he said, but not a strong one. He raised some interesting points, however, as to the difficulties of studying the subject and established some protocol that could be used for further investigation. Ghost hunting in the lab. As he prepared to begin his investigation, Barus met with Mary Macy in Boulder, California. Macy had taken photos she said contained spirit images and had also tried to prove the existence of other realms through EVP recordings. Macy gave Barus some advice on how to proceed, as recounted by Barus. He emphasized two things. The more successful experiments have been the result of spiritual purpose, so that spiritual integrity is necessary on that part of ITC researchers, and the ability to obtain anomalous voices and images is dependent upon the establishment of a contact field through regular and persistent effort. Could an attempt to scientifically verify EVP also have a scientifically spiritual purpose or integrity behind it? As to establishing a contact field, Barus noted that the parameters for the development of such a field, other than presumably the prerequisite of spirituality and the need for persistence, are unknown. Nonetheless, he selected two assistants back at the University of London, Canada, London, Ontario, of course, whom he esteemed for their integrity. They set up equipment in a quiet corner of the campus in a room closed off from voices of incarnate beings to ensure any voices heard would be sufficiently mysterious, and he kept the experiment secret to ensure no pranksters could interfere. Taking turns, each would sit in the room and record themselves talking to any spirits that may be listening. EVP experiments by others have often required a radio tuned between stations or a TV on a blank channel. Barus and his assistants thus tuned the radio between stations to record, and later they would play back the tape to listen for any voices aside from their own. And what they heard. Baruch described what they heard for most of the recording, which totaled 60 hours. In addition to static and apparent radio stations breaking through from time to time, there was also a buzzing noise, probably caused by interference from the overhead fluorescent lights. There were occasional dramatic fluctuations of the background noise, as were similar to fluctuations that I heard during Macy's demonstration on his equipment that he attributed to an effort on the part of those in spirit to control the radio output. The most remarkable result came October 17, 1997, when it sounded like someone said, "Tell Peter." Both Baruch and one of his two assistants independently identified the words as "Tell Peter," describing the voice as female and as speaking at a regular speed. The assistant, Gail, thought the voice sounded like a deceased woman she had known whose husband's name was Peter. Another event was a squawking noise 13 seconds after one of the researchers asked if any spirits were present. The noise, with a little imagination, could be interpreted as "hello," Baruch wrote. Some EVP has been dismissed as enthusiasts imagining random noise to sound like words. Some have said it's parts of a radio broadcast tuning in and out. Enthusiasts have said, however, that one must simply become accustomed to listening carefully for these kinds of communications before being able to hear them more clearly. The language of the communications has also been said to change depending on the listener, irregardless of the local language broadcast on the radio programs. What would have convinced Baruch? Baruch gave a couple of examples of what would have constituted hard evidence that EVP exists. The late Dr. Konstantin Rodiv studied EVP and said the voices would speak to him in his native language of Latvian. Quote, as I am also a native speaker of Latvian, had clear and meaningful phrases in Latvian showed up on the tapes, if indeed phrases in Latvian spoke by Rodiv had showed up on the tapes, given that Rodiv has purportedly addressed others in English since his death in 1974, that would have been an argument in favor of a paranormal origin for the voices, Baruch wrote. We would have also been convinced if one of the operators had been clearly addressed by name and given information that was unlikely to have been known by anyone else, as has been reported by some EVP researchers. Baruch noted that his experiments may not have been sufficiently spiritual, if that is indeed a requirement for EVP to manifest. George Meek, an industrialist who invested in an EVP recording machine known as the Spirit Com in the 1980s, had said that at least one physical endowed person must be involved. EVP could be one of three things, said Baruch. Either it's nothing unusual, a phenomenon created by known psychological factors, or it is the anomalous influence of researchers on electric equipment. Researchers in Princeton University's Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Lab have suggested that people may be able to affect electronic devices with their minds, or it really is incarnate beings influencing the minds or the equipment of the investigators. This is on Soul Ask. Please leave your comments and thank you for your support. Please support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.